Good morning, you beautiful people, you. And welcome to the First Congregational Church of Woodstock, as well as our joint union service with the East Woodstock Congregational Church. Both of our congregations welcome you, and both of our congregations celebrate that wherever you are, whoever you are, wherever you find yourself on your life or spiritual journey, you are welcome to worship with us. It is a blessing that during the summer our two congregations gather together so that we can celebrate this God who created all that is this beautiful day that God has made and blessed us and said that it is all indeed good.
All creatures of our God and King, lift up your voice and with us sing. Oh, praise ye, hallelujah. Oh, brother sun with golden beam, oh, sister moon with softer gleam. Oh, praise ye, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Shall we be in the spirit of prayer? Loving God, open our heart and mind to those holy words and how they may speak to us today in our own lives. Amen.
In the beginning, there was the Word. The Word was in God's presence, and the Word was God.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, but the earth became chaos and emptiness, and darkness came over the face of the deep.
The Word was present to God from the beginning.
And the Spirit of God was brooding over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Be light," and light was. God saw that light was good, and God separated light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness night. Evening came, and morning followed, the first day.
Through the Word, all things came into being, and apart from the Word, nothing came into being that has come into being.
Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, to be like us. Let them be stewards of the fish in the sea, the birds of the air, the cattle, the wild animals, and everything that crawls on the ground." Humankind was created as God's reflection. In the divine image of God created them. Female and male, God made them.
In the Word was life, and that life was humanity's light.
God blessed them and said, "Bear fruit, increase your numbers, and fill the earth, and be responsible for it. Watch over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and all the living things on the earth." So it was, God looked at all of his creation and proclaimed that this was good, very good. Evening came and morning followed, the sixth day.
A light shines in the darkness, a light that the darkness has never overtaken.
May these words comfort, challenge, and inspire us. Thanks be to God.
Today, we're beginning a worship series, which I call In Search of the Living God. And it is a bit of a project to recover all that is good, for us to find ways that we believe in this living God, the God who is good, and yet too often within our life, we feel that we are in these places on our journey. Has this ever happened to you? You feel like you're on a place on your journey that God just isn't there. God isn't present, yet we believe that God is with us at every step. And so for the next 4 Sundays that I am with you, it's this Sunday and then October 13th through October 27th, we're going to move through the 4-fold process of looking and searching for the living God. We talk about living God. It is a term which is referenced within the scriptures 36 different times, and it is alluded to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times in the ways that God is engaged in relationship with prophets and poets and mystics and messengers, with Jesus Christ, and the promise that God is in relationship with you and with me. The deacons are passing out some flowers. These are flowers that I just went around the garden this morning and I picked. If you have allergies, by all means, this is invitation, not obligation. So as they pass out a flower, I invite you to take one if you feel so moved, but also don't feel obligated to do that. We are going to be reflecting on these flowers in a minute, and I will make that clear on the reason why. But first, I want to go back. Have you ever felt at any point in your life that somehow you were outside of God's story? That you were praying and praying and praying and seeking and searching to find yourself in relationship with the living God, and somehow there was emptiness, there was silence, that you could not experience or find yourself or feel comfortable in relationship with this God who is love. Or how about this? You heard the words that Holly and Kathy said. It is the beginning of the book of Genesis, the very opening chapter of the scriptures. And it was the prologue to the Gospel of John, the kind of the summary of what the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, is all about. Did you hear, right? In the Word was life, and that life was the light of all people. Did you hear when Kathy talked about when creation was made? God looked at all of creation and said that it was very good. How often has your experience or the teachings that you have received, maybe as a small child or even as an adult, or the messages that you receive out in the world, are not about this God who blesses all creation, who looks at all created beings, all people in all of creation, and says it is blessed and it is good? How often, even as we hear that message, we have the voices from the past running around in our heads. As far as I'm concerned, Christianity over the last 2,000 years ago, organized religion, has a lot that we need to confess. We need to confess that too often that has not been the message that we have sent. Too often the message has been steeped in fear, in worry, and control. Too often it has been a message where some people are in and others are pushed out. Those who make us uncomfortable, those who look different, those who act different, those who cannot form or conform. We look out at the goodness of all God's creation. That's what the beginning of Genesis is to tell us. That's what the prologue of the Gospel of John helps us to understand. That in life, all of life, not some of life, not some people, not certain kinds of faith, not certain religions, that in all of life, God blessed it, empowered it, breathed over it, and said that it was good. We can, as humanity has, looked out into creation at these tiny little flowers, and they can tell us something about the goodness and the blessing and the beauty and the wonder of God's love. But as I said, In Search of the Living God is a bit of a recovery story. For me, it is the recovery of how we find our way from the way of fear back into full, whole, and wholesome relationship with this loving God, the God who creates you in God's own image and blesses you with immense, beautiful diversity and gifts of creativity so that we might reflect God's love in order to help bring life and give life to life. If you think back, what are the first stories that you were told about when you think about God in creation? When you think about God in nature? Was it this good God who blesses everything? Or was it for me? And I can't tell you exactly when, right? I think about it, right? When I was a small kid and there were thunderstorms, right? Big, loud crashes and lightning flashes. I don't know if it was a Sunday school teacher trying to mean well, or a brother or a sister, or an aunt or an uncle, or maybe it was a babysitter trying to like calm my nerves and push away my worry. But right, the thunder would happen and the lightning would flash and I'd be like scared almost to death. And what would they say? They tell me, oh, well, that's just, don't worry about it. That's like just God up there bowling in heaven with all the saints. There'd be this far off, distant little rumble, and we were told that must be a saint throwing a gutter ball, because of course God only throws strikes. And then we'd hear like this clap of thunder and a little flash of lightning, and it might echo or reverberate in some funny way, and we're told that's a split. That must have been another saint. But then, right, as the storm would approach and get really, really close, it was almost instantaneous. You'd hear the sound of thunder, and you would see the flash of lightning, and you'd be scared out of your wits. And that was God who had made a strike. It's a simplistic story, and it's a nice way to calm our nerves. But we know a lot about science and how thunderstorms form, and it has nothing to do with God in heaven bowling or with the saints. And yeah, as a small child, that was for a long time what I ran around with and what I thought was totally possibly true. Now think about that. That's not about the living God who's in relationship with you. That's about some distant God who's far off bowling and is completely indifferent to the fear and the worry that he is instilling in a small 4-year-old or 5-year-old kid. That's not the God that we see in the book of Genesis. That's not the God who comes to us in the dark of night to break through in the silence of night to be with us in the small, innocent child who grows up to be Jesus, who is the Christ. So then, as I grew up, I don't know, I was one of those rambunctious little tweens or almost tweens, somewhere between 5th, 6th, 7th grade. I have no idea. That crazy part of life. And so at some point, I remember the conversation actually came up in Sunday school, and we asked our Sunday school teacher, who was a really good Calvinist, about thunder and lightning and what that tell us of God. And do you know what he said? He said that God's being angry with you. That you got to watch out. That you basically have to live by the rules, behave, conform. Right? I think he was just trying to get control over a rambunctious bunch of kids. But he instilled in us the fear of the living God. Right? And as silly and as much as we want to laugh, look what happens. Hurricane Katrina, a typhoon, right, in Taiwan, or the Philippines, or some far distant place, or a house burns, or you lose your job, or your relationship breaks up, or you get an illness, or whatever happens. And how often are people trying to attribute that to somehow God trying to punish you as an individual or whole group of people? God doesn't work that way. That is a broken theology. It is inconsistent with the prologue of the Gospel of John, with the message of Jesus Christ, or anything that we even see in the very beginning chapter of the book of Genesis. God creates and looks at creation 6 days. It is good. It is good. It is good. It is good. It's really, really good. God creates in and out of relationship and for love. That's the goodness of the living God. God commits to be with us wherever we are on the journey. And the lowest point of our life, if it feels as though God may be silent, maybe God is listening deeply to the brokenness of your heart. Listening like no one else in the world was willing to just be present with you and listen to you as you grieve whatever it is that you are grieving, as you try to find your way in whatever way that it is that you are trying to find your way. That God is giving you the encouragement and the strength in order to find your way through so that you can see the bright, shining light even in the deepest darkness of night. Now, I went to high school, I had earth sciences. I learned about cumulonimbus clouds and the way that the electrons gather in the atmosphere and eventually, right, how the cataclysms of thunder and lightning and rain and hail happen. I learned about plate tectonics and earthquakes and volcanoes, right, the natural order of the world. This is part of what happens in a living ecosystem. Things happen. God creates all that is out of good, and life happens. Seeds are created and flowers grow, and eventually some actually create other seeds, but some become bird food. Some become eaten by bugs. Some are picked in order that we might celebrate the beauty of all of God's creation. Thunderstorms and earthquakes happen, and it doesn't have anything to do with how good you are. And yet, even after having earth sciences and after having learned a little bit more about the goodness of the nature and the relationship of God, I can tell you that sometime in my late teens, as I had all of that whirl of crazy internal questions of who am I and where am I and who am I called to be and how am I supposed to be, those old tapes kept running in my head. And I will tell you, first, do not try this at home. And one of the dumbest things that I've ever done in my life, filled with fear and anger at the God who would create a mistake like me. I remember one of those thunderstorms when I was there at home, living at home, nobody else was there, and I could hear it coming in, and as the rain came down and the thunder and the lightning started to flash around me, I went outside with an umbrella and I dared God to strike at me. How dumb is that? How dumb a theology is that? This isn't who God is. It's not how God acts. And yet, when we continue to promulgate a legacy of hurt, when we sing songs and we say words and we give aphorisms because it's tradition, it continues to do great damage. God is the God of love. God creates each and every person out of love. That needs to be on our lips and in our hearts. And you know what? We need to be saying that to one another here within this space and to everybody out in the community. It's who you are and what you've been gifted. We need to recover the goodness and the glory and the beauty of love. And one of the gifts and one of the ways that I'm going to encourage you to try it, you can try this at home. For those of you who have a flower, and for those of you who don't, you can focus on those. But I encourage you, just take a look for a moment. Just look at the flower. Just be present with the flower. Don't overthink it. Thomas Merton says, right, to be present is truly just to be present. To be present with another, whether it's with a flower or with another person or with a bird or a squirrel or whatever. Just be present. Observe. Look at its color, its texture. Look at its imperfections. And look at the perfect way. What story might that little flower that you're holding in your hand, what might it tell you about the goodness of the living God? What might it tell you about the hope that God has and the beauty that God has for creation? What might it tell you about the glory and the beauty of the great diversity and the interconnectedness of each of those little petals, and that will become a tiny little seed that will somehow be carried off into the world in order to feed a bird or create the next generation? What might these little flowers, as you reflect on them, what might they tell you? How might they help you recover the God who we hear in the beginning of the book of Genesis, who creates and says all is good? The God who comes to us in the one who is Jesus Christ, who in the prologue of the Gospel of John is the word that brings life and light. And that light was life for all people, not some, not those who conform, not those who are good, not those who we judge that are worth it, for all people. What do you think? What are these flowers telling you about the living God? Shout it out. What does this flower that you hold in your hand, what might it tell you about the goodness of who God is? We're not perfect, and we're beautiful. What else? We're different. Who said that? Yeah, we're different. What else? Fair. Fair. God's fair. Hold up your flowers. Look around. What do you see? Color and beauty and diversity, different styles and textures. Some of you have herbs and some of you have pollinators and some of you have native flowers and some of you have unique rhythms. And it's the glory and the goodness of God's creation. In that little flower, you have the essence of hope. You feel lost and alone on your journey. Just go out and find a flower. Go to a florist and get a flower. Just pick up your computer and meditate on the glory of a flower and let that remind you that if this is the care that God gives to each of these little flowers. Remember, Jesus says this. If God cares for the lilies of the field and this tiny little sparrow, imagine how much love and goodness our Creator has for you and me and all of us together. There are 4 paths to recover our relationship in the goodness and the hope and the love of this living God. The first, and the mystics always begin with the first, it is for us to look out in the positive, the original blessing, and nature and creativity. The second is for us to actually find our way through, it's called the via negativa. It's the negative way, but let me be clear. This is not about sarcasm and it's not about all the negativity that you see in the world. It's about emptiness. It's about finding our way through uncertainty. Finding our way when it feels like we are in the midst of grief and loss. It's about feeling God's loving presence, holding us up when we don't think that we can hold ourselves up or take the next step. It's finding the care and the grace of God's love expressed in the love that somebody expresses for us when I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. That's the via negativa. And then it's the via creativa, which is all about us using the creative gifts that God has given to us in order to give life and bring life to life. Whether you're a singer or a musician or a potter or a gardener or a mom or a dad or a teacher or a baker, you have been given gifts. And when we use those gifts in creative ways in order to heal and bring hope, we express God's love in the truest essence of the word. And the last is via transformativa. And that's about transformation. And for me, that is about the important work that we have been called throughout the centuries and throughout the histories, all the way back to ancient Judaism, for us to use our gifts and use our presence collectively as a community in order to heal the world. To heal the world of suffering. To heal the world of poverty. To heal the world of the fragmentation and the fear and the brokenness and the negative theology that prevent us from being who God created us individually and collectively to be, the people of God, called and created to reflect light and love and life. May God continue to challenge us and bless us. May you know that wherever you are as beautiful and more precious than that tiny little flower that you hold in your hand.